House of Dracula was a 1945 Universal monster movie that sort of features a meeting of Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Frankenstein monster. I say sort of, as the three characters unfortunately don't share a great deal of screen time together. But they are here, and it's kind of neat to see, the three kind of featured prominently here. The film opens up with Count Dracula, played by John Carradine, arriving at the castle house of Dr. Franz Edelmann, who's played by Onslow Stevens. And he's a scientist who is not mad quite yet, and he's here and he's willing to help, the Count with his vampire problem. Now, a note on John Carradine as Dracula. I gotta be honest, I just didn't really get into him as the character. He's okay, but you can't top Bella Lugosi or even Christopher Lee. They just felt more like they had captured the spirit of Dracula. With Carradine and his long gaunt face and the mustache, he just looks more like, the master from Manos, the Hands of Fate, instead of Dracula to me. But, he carries the role well, and he manages it, and manages to be plenty creepy through the film. So, in this film, he's going by the name of Baron Latos. So I guess he's got kind of an alternate identity or something. And he tells the doctor that he wants to be cured of being a vampire, which is really interesting. I didn't really follow why from the film, and maybe they didn't go into it deep enough, but it did curiously remind me of the film Dracula's Daughter from 1936, where you had the main character, Dracula's daughter, who also wanted to be cured of being a vampire. So, interesting parallel. So the doctor agrees to, help out with this. Working with this doctor are his two assistants, Melizia, played by Martha O'Driscoll, and a hunchbacked character named Nina, played by Jane Addams. And this was an interesting spin in that she's a very lovely actress, but she's also the hunchback character. So it's kind of like they put a different type of a spin on it. She's not as creepy as you kind of perceive the hunchback. She's actually very gorgeous. And when you first see her in the film, it's like not really revealed just yet. It's like, oh, I see. Okay, so she's the hunchback helping out in this laboratory. So back to the story. The doctor thinks that with Dracula, a series of blood transfusions might help him out. But, we, the viewer, we know this is just flat out ridiculous, and it's just not going to end well. So, later that night, the character Larry Talbot shows up. He's played by Lon Chaney Jr., and it's great to see him again. Such an awesome actor. So he shows up, and once again, he's playing this nervous, panic-filled character who desperately wants to be cured of his transformations into a werewolf whenever there's a full moon. So he seeks out the same doctor. So, back to back, we've got two monster characters showing up at this castle to get a monster cure from the doctor. So, I thought that was kind of cool. And again, it's great to see Lon Chaney again. But seriously, what is the deal with these monsters and their mustaches? I mean, at least grow a cool beard to go with it. But anyhow, since time is running out and the moon's going to come out soon, Larry heads to town to be thrown into like a prison cell before he transforms and hurts anybody. Sure enough, they get him in the cell, they lock the door, and the transformation begins, and we see that, that step-by-step transformation as the hair starts to grow and he turns into the Wolfman. So Dr. Edelmann, he's summoned there and he watches the whole transformation, so he definitely knows, yeah, this guy's a Wolfman. It's pretty legit. So the villagers in town, as you would expect, they get, they find out what's going on. They start to grow a little bit concerned. And just kind of keep that in mind because that kind of comes in later in the story. And I thought it was interesting. One of the villagers, who is played by this actor named Skelton Nags. I'm not familiar with him from anything else, but he's got this really cool name. It kind of looks like Skeleton Nags. But anyhow, he's this actor with very distinctive features, and I'm curious to see him in some more films. I've read that he was actually in a couple films with Boris Karloff. So I'm going to get to those eventually. I start to wonder sometimes if I'm going to die of old age before I get a chance to get through all of these films I want to see. Oh well. So, Talbot and the doctor, they head back to the castle. He's turned back into a human again. The doctor thinks that this Wolfman thing is all in Talbot's brain. and that he has some sort of special spores that might help him out. Yeah, okay. And Talbot, however, starts to grow desperate, and, well, he just jumps off a cliff to end his life. So, all right. The castle is right by the shore. There's a big cliff, so Talbot just jumps off and lands in some water. But he washes into a cave. It's down by the waterside, and Dr. Edelmann descends on a harness down to rescue him. So he finds the cave that Talbot was washed into, but alas, he has turned into the Wolfman, and there's a brief fight scene. But just in time, Talbot reverts back to human again, and everything's good. And curiously enough, while they are in this cave, they find the Frankenstein monster, who's sort of washed up in the cave, and he's kind of buried beneath like sand and junk and debris, and he's in this suspended animation state. So Talbot finds a convenient staircase in this cave that leads back up to the castle. So Dr. Edelmann brings the monster back up to his lab, but decides against reanimating him because, well, he tends to become a killing monster. So the monster is back in his lab, but kind of still in a sleep state. So meanwhile, Count Dracula, or Latos as he's also called, he tries to woo Melissia with his dark ways, but he is repelled by her cross. And then the doctor then turns his focus from the Wolfman back to Dracula and goes through with his blood transfusion idea. Again, seems like a bad idea to we the viewers, but yeah, go for it. So what happens is Dracula hypnotizes the doctor and sets up the transfusion to, I think, put all of his vampire blood into the doctor. And then Dracula carries off this Melissia, presumably to, bite her in the neck and stuff. But the doctor stops him at the last minute with the cross. And as Dracula is now back in his coffin, the doctor moves it into the sun. And, well, you know what happens with sun and vampires. So it's not really a spoiler per se, as this kind of happens around the odd middle part of the film, is when the Dracula character is kind of wiped out. So, however, at this point, Dr. Edelmann, he starts to go crazy due to Dracula's blood in his veins. And he starts doing this Jekyll and Hyde character transformation, where he will go from sensible scientist to raving lunatic. And he does turn back to normal again, and he does the procedure to help the Talbot Wolfman character heal from being a wolf. And it involves kind of bandaging up his head and so on. And then immediately after that, he proceeds to go nutty again and runs off and kills his gardener. So the villagers catch on to this, and they chase after him, thinking that it's the Talbot, the Wolfman character, back to his antics again. So Dr. Edelmann, who's back to being full-on crazy, he decides to reanimate the Frankenstein monster. And, well, I'll just leave the review here, as we finally get into the third and final of the monsters. And even though it is sort of a brief window, it's kind of cool to see Frankenstein back in action again. But watch the film for yourself to see, did the Wolfman cure work? What happens with the monster? And so on. But, final thoughts. It's a fun film. It's a fun mashup of the classic monsters, even if John Carradine didn't really work for me as Dracula. I did love seeing Lon Chaney Jr. again as that tortured Wolfman character, and it was nice to see the character, the lovely Melissia, who falls in love with him. Even knowing full well that, he's a Wolfman and stuff like that, and that could be a barrier to their relationship, she still cares for him, and I think has a genuine sympathy for his character who is so tortured that, he deals with these transformations. Glenn Strange did a fine job as the massive, staggering Frankenstein monster. But, as I look at him, he looks less like the Boris Karloff monster and maybe more of the Fred Gwynne version. It's big shoes to fill, literally, but he does a good job. And Onslow Stevens as Dr. Edelmann was the fun, mad scientist to include in the film. I liked having kind of that Jekyll and Hyde craziness going on. And that worked well with the other classic monsters. I did find I was wondering, why was this called House of Dracula, as it was more specifically the house of the Dr. Edelmann, who was trying to help these monsters, but Yeah, hey, I won't analyze it too much, and I just enjoy the film. It was an entertaining entry into the Universal Classic Monster series, and this is a good one. It's worth checking out.